You're listening to BBC Radio Cumbria. I'm Andrew Carter, and now in my Falklands War story, you can hear from two Cumbrians who witnessed history when, in April 1982, the Argentines invaded the Falkland Islands. It's a conversation between two people, Rachel Simons, who was a 10-year-old schoolgirl living in Port Stanley at the time, and Mark Gibbs, a Royal Marine who'd arrived on the island 2 days before hostilities began. Using archive recordings from the Falkland Islands Broadcasting Service, you'll hear the invasion unfold on the equivalent of their local radio station. You will also hear Ricky Phillips, whose new book, The First Casualty, promises to rewrite British and Argentine military history. If you think you know what happened when the Argentines invaded the Falkland Islands 35 years ago, then you're going to be in for a surprise.
I got talked into going down there by my workshop corporal. I was an armourer with 4-1 Commando at Deal. It appealed to me, being away from home for a year, so I volunteered for it and was accepted. Major Norman called us into the education classroom at Royal Marines Pool and broke the news to us that Argentina had said, unless there's a resolution, that they would be invading in 1982. One of the lads said, what do you mean, boss? He said, does it mean we're going to be at war? Major Norman said, yes.
To hear that you already knew, even before you left Britain, that it was almost definitely going to happen, I find it a bit threatening and a bit disconcerting that everybody knew except for me. And it wasn't a nice surprise.
No, I don't think it was a nice surprise for anybody.
No.
You are listening to the Falkland Islands Broadcasting Station. We now go over to Government House for a message from His Excellency the Governor. Over to His Excellency the Governor, Mr. Hunt.
Good evening. I have an important announcement to make about the state of affairs between the British and Argentine governments over the Falkland Islands dispute.
It's impossible to consider that we didn't know that Argentina were going to invade. I think the rumours, certainly from December 1981, had been very, very strong. There were almost daily reports going back to London saying, we know they're coming. We know what month they're coming. We even know what date they're coming. It was the worst kept secret since Christmas.
The British ambassador in Buenos Aires yesterday delivered a further message to the Argentine government, urging a negotiated settlement to current problems and offering to send a senior emissary to Buenos Aires. The Argentinian foreign minister had today responded to this approach in negative terms. There is mounting evidence that the Argentine armed forces are preparing to invade the Falkland Islands.
During the briefing, Major Norman said, if anybody wants to drop out of the detachment, I won't think any less of them. Nobody did.
Yeah. See?
We knew there was a war coming, and we just accepted it.
Yeah.
That's our job. It wasn't taken seriously. We didn't think it would happen, but it did.
The Royal Marines, firstly, were there as a tripwire force, a very small force that, if attacked, can't win, but will provoke a major reaction. What were the Marines expected to do when they were there? They were certainly expected to fight. The order that came through late on April 1st, maybe very early hours of April 2nd, were you will fight until overrun. They were expected to fight, and they did. Do I think they were kind of a sacrificial lamb? Absolutely.
Argentines we always greeted with great suspicion, and there was always this cloud hanging over our heads that one day they would do something. We referred to it as do something silly, but do something outrageously ridiculous and try and take over our home. We kind of knew that it was going to happen one day, and there were moments of tension over the years before. We were suspicious of them, but we'd still go to their birthday parties. Yeah.
That all changed on April the 2nd.
That's right, yeah.
In these circumstances, I think it is necessary to take certain precautionary measures I have alerted the Royal Marines, and I ask now for all serving members, all active members of the Falkland Islands Defence Force to report to the drill hall as soon as possible. They will be on guard tonight at key points in the town.
I never even thought about what size military Argentina would send our way. It was always just a concept they might come and take over. And so I felt quite reassured that we had a military presence there to take care of us. We really liked the Marines and eagerly anticipated the new bunch coming. And there was always this big dance, the hello goodbye dance.
I just wish I'd got the chance to actually see that and take part in it.
Yeah.
But circumstances conspired against us.
I am sailing stormy waters to be near you, to be free.
I expect to have to declare a state of emergency, perhaps before dawn tomorrow. I shall come on the air again as soon as I have anything to report. But in the meantime, I would urge you all to remain calm and to keep off the streets. I shall let you know as soon as I have anything further to report.
We arrived late evening, it was getting dark. Remember a few of the locals on the jetty, and it was odd. I got the impression, oh, they've come to look at the fresh meat. And that night, after our evening meal and a shower, went to the Moody Brook Bar. And a rather heavy drinking session ensued.
If you ask a lot of the Marines, if you read a lot of the accounts that I've got, some of them said, look, we were told when we signed up for it, there's no discotheque, there's no nightlife, there's no pub scene or club scene. You know, this was the 80s. This was, people were getting cool right now. And they didn't expect when they were going to the Falklands, it was like stepping back into the 1940s. It was a place where there weren't many TVs. Letters from home were once every 6 weeks, if they were sent. Darts by radio darts was one of the highlights of Falklands life, and basically the national sport was darts and drinking. That was literally all there was.
Then the following day, with a very, very bad hangover, realised things were getting serious because I was told to throw the armoury open and just give the lads whatever they wanted.
So this was the 1st of April.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. This is Patrick Watt speaking, your broadcasting officer.
Local radio was on the whole time, listening. We had rediffusion system around Stanley. All the houses were connected to the broadcasting studio with these wires, and we had these little loudspeakers in the corner of our living rooms.
As you've just heard His Excellency say, the situation here is rather serious at the moment, and in view of this, we have decided to keep the radio station open until further notice. Thank you very much, and just keep listening to the FIBS. If there is news, we will certainly tell you about it. Now I'll hand you back to our announcer, Michael Smallwood.
Well, as it says in those large, famously friendly letters on the cover of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, don't panic. It's now time for special requests.
I was at school Thursday, the 1st of April, 1982. Yeah, I was at school. In my class, I was in the last year of junior school. And it was just a normal day, so I can't really remember much about it. But I do remember that I came home from school and I'd forgotten my reading book and I'd forgotten my glasses. Now, books are big business for me. I really like reading. And the book that I was reading was James and the Giant Peach. And I really, really wanted to know what happened next. Which, yeah, total contrast. There you are, flinging guns out of your armoury. And I'm concerned with what's going on in James and the Giant Peach. So I went home from school. Mum told us that she'd been to a very important meeting at Government House. You see, my mum was matron of the hospital, and she and the senior doctor had been called up to Government House with all the other heads of departments, met with Rex Hunt, the governor, and he told them the whole story, that the Argentines were invading, and they needed to prepare themselves for it. And so Mum told my sister Isabel and I that the Argentines were coming and that the governor was going to make this important announcement on the radio later this evening, and that she had to actually go and work in the hospital. And indeed she did. The hospital wasn't far away, and she went and started to get ready for a war that was coming.
And please do not add to the troubles of the security services by making demonstrations or damaging Argentine property. This would play into their hands and simply provide them with the excuse they need to invade us. So please, do not take the law into your own hands. Let us show our visitors that we are responsible, law-abiding, but resolute citizens.
The highlight of the announcement was that school was cancelled, and we thought that was very exciting, of course. Not sure what we thought of anything else. I had never even seen a war film. I had no concept of what your home being invaded by Argentines meant.
The extent of our preparation was getting armed up, receiving a set of orders from Major Norman, because by the stage he had assumed command from Major Newt.
Yeah.
He gave the best set of orders I've ever experienced, covering all eventualities. And basically his plan was to have a collapsing defence. Small penny packets of guys spread out around the islands, which would, as they encountered the Argentines, hit them and then withdraw, heading back towards the seat of government to protect the governor.
Mm-hmm.
So we deployed with 2 section near the old beaver hangar on the airport road. We just waited.
These guys had great friends, they had girlfriends, they had in some cases wives, children amongst the Falkland Islanders. Most of them had been there on a year's tour. A lot of them were repeat offenders. They'd been there quite a few times and they liked it and they went back. These people were defending their friends, their families. These were not just Raw Marines just doing their job. The idea of surrendering and not defending your friends and family just didn't figure into it.
Now, I have no further news about the Argentine Navy task force, but may I just say that the morale of the Royal Marines and the FIDF is terrific, and it makes me proud to be their Commander-in-Chief. That's all for now. I'll report when anything has been observed.
You are back with the studio here again now. We will, of course, repeat his governor's message in about 5 minutes' time.
And then, before dawn, we heard bangs and explosions coming from our barracks at Moody Brook. And that was we found out afterwards that was the Argentines absolutely shooting the place to ribbons. They gassed it and grenaded it as well. They were trying to kill us in our beds. But fortunately, we weren't there.
This is the governor speaking. This is just to let you know that the first Argentine ships have been sighted in Port William, and 1 landing craft approaching the Narrows. Everything is under control. We're keeping them under surveillance. That is all for now. There have been 1 or 2 bangs at Moody Brook, but we consider that this is a diversion. That's all for now.
It's a big anomaly in the entire story. The Argentines were definitely told, don't cause any casualties. You can do this swamping them with numbers. We don't have to kill anyone. I think they knew exactly what casualties would do and would get everyone on Britain's side. So they were playing the opposite game to how we were. Every single Royal Marine who saw Moody Brook Barracks would tell you exactly the same. If there had been anyone in those bunks, they would have been murdered in their beds. I did actually try and speak to Commander Sanchez Sabarot, who commanded that force, and I know a good friend of his, and he was unavailable for comment.
Just after dawn, we could hear armoured vehicles coming towards us. And I remember seeing 3 LVTP-7 Amtraks coming down the road towards us. And the boss, Bill Trollope, said the position was useless against armour. We were to pull back. So we all piled into a long wheelbase Land Rover. I don't think a Land Rover's ever been so overloaded, ever. we all piled into this one vehicle and headed back to the edge of Port Stanley, to a place which was called, you know it anyway, called White City. A series of prefab buildings with antennas around them. That's where we just went to grab what cover we could in amongst the tussock grass and waited for the armoured vehicles to come down the road towards us.
And that's the best road in Stanley at the time, so they could have covered that road quite quickly.
Yeah, they did.
And they're the biggest vehicles that had ever been in the Falklands, I think.
Yeah, Amtrak is a big vehicle.
Absolutely. 28 tonnes or something, aren't they?
Yeah. And crew of 3 and up to 25 fully armed troops in the back, armoured with a 50 calibre machine gun. Pretty impressive, scary beast when it's coming towards you.
Well, yeah, I saw them later that day, coming in our streets, and was terrified. So, scary beast is definitely a word for it. And that distinctive whistly, whiny noise of the engine, and the tank tracks, caterpillar tracks, what do you call them?
Caterpillar tracks.
Caterpillar tracks. Really, really horrible noise, and they rattle along the road. Yeah.
The worst part was the wait. The waiting for them to make their move. And then seeing those armoured vehicles, knowing that the guys inside them were pretty safe because the vehicles themselves were impervious to rifle and machine gun fire, and knowing that those things could just roll straight over us. With that 50 caliber Browning machine gun, they had some hitting power. As an idea of how effective this gun was. As we broke contact and legged it back into the edge of Stanley, they thought we'd engaged them from a digger, a JCB type backhoe digger. And I remember as I was running past it, the shots from 150 caliber were hitting the cast steel backhoe arm on this JCB. Hit it, there's a big splash, and they just carried straight on through. They didn't stop. The windows in the digger were shattering. And I think, these people are out to kill us.
Yeah.
I think we've upset them.
Yeah.
But we ambushed the vehicles. Lieutenant Trollope had said that nobody was to engage until the 84mm gun had engaged first of all. But we'd not even had time to bore sight the weapon to match the sight to the barrel of the gun to make sure you actually hit what you aimed at. And that was manned by George Brown and Danny Betts. They fired. Their first round landed approximately 50 metres in front of us. At the time, the targets, the Amtraks, were about 150, 200 metres away. I fired a 66mm rocket, and that detonated in flight. It appeared to strike a single-strand wire fence. George and Danny fired again with the 84. Other guys had opened up with rifle and machine gun fire at this vehicle as well. I fired a second 66mm rocket through the hole in the fence that I'd made previously, and that struck the vehicle 3/4 of the way along and 3/4 of the way up on the left-hand side in the passenger compartment. Then George and Danny fired their third round, because the vehicle had manoeuvred, it was now more or less head on to us. Their third round struck it on the front. The vehicle just rocked on its springs, gave off a gout of black smoke, and nobody came out of it. The other two vehicles, they deployed their troops. We took them on with rifle and machine gun fire.
As long as we can hear, and if we go off the air, the radio station will carry on. That's all for now.
I knew that if I knelt up and fired that rocket, I had very, very little chance of survival. But when you fire one of those things, it gets a big backblast area, and dust and loose stuff starts flying around. It's basically waving a flag saying, "Look, I'm over here."
Yeah.
And I knew that if I fired it, my chances of survival were pretty low.
Mm-hmm.
But like an idiot, I fired 2. And then rifle fire as well. But at that time, I honestly thought I was going to die. I didn't think I'd be coming away from White City. But professionalism paid off, I guess.
Did Gibbo hit it? He's definitely in no doubt. When I spoke to George Brown, Danny Betts, Burt Reynolds as well, this vehicle was hit by 3 anti-tank rockets. It's been apocryphal. It's been one of those things that for years we've said, well, it may have been, it may not have been, but look, there's no evidence. Well, we found it. It's currently sat in a municipal park, would you believe, just in Buenos Aires. And oddly, I can tell you which one it was. It was number 17. Now, if you look at the Argentine records, they said we had 21 Amtraks. We only took 20. We didn't take 17. Those Amtraks were only used in combat one day ever, and that was it, April 2nd. So the only vehicle that they claim didn't go has the exact matching damage to the one the Royal Marines said they hit. Where else would it get 3 rocket holes exactly where the Royal Marines said they hit it, and even be covered in bullet marks? Once you start looking at the evidence, it is that one, and it was a Argentine military historian and military vehicles expert, a man called Fogliani, who found the paperwork and said, no, look, 17 did go. It was operationally restricted and still being repaired. It was sent down and caught up that night. So at night, someone took vehicle number 17 down to the Cabo San Antonio and put it on board. Who knew about this? I don't know. Was the paperwork destroyed? Was the paperwork never made out? I don't know. The evidence is just overwhelming. It happened, and it's vehicle number 17, which supposedly never took part in the invasion, and that's why it's been so easy to hide.
I think that fight, as you call it, battle, as I think of it, at White City, actually changed the tone and direction of the invasion force.
I think it definitely made them stop and pause, because there seemed to be, after that, when we got back into the Davis Street, was it?
Yeah.
When we were in the area of Davis Street, there seemed to be a lull.
Mm-hmm.
There was small arms fire coming from around Government House.
Yeah.
But there seemed to be not much happening to the east of Stanley, coming from the airport direction. I think that slowed them down.
Uh-huh.
They'd had their nose put out of joint, and they thought, oh God, what's going to happen next?
Right, well, I have now His Excellency the Governor on the phone again. Could you give us the latest situation, please, sir?
Yes, it's quiet at the moment, but we're pinned down. We've been trying to move the people a bit further out from the perimeter of Government House, and every time anybody tries to move, they start shooting. So they've got us well and truly pinned down. But they're not trying to attack, so I think they're waiting for the armoured personnel vehicles to come. And then I think maybe they'll have another go.
Yeah, how much longer do you think you can hold out, sir?
Well, I mean, if they've got 30mm cannon on these armoured personnel carriers, so 1 or 2 shots of them and we'd be finished, I'm afraid.
Yes, sir.
On the word from the boss, we then broke contact and got back into the streets of Stanley itself and started bouncing from garden to garden, over fences and hedges, trying to get back to Government House.
Because by then the Argentines were out and they were shooting back.
Yeah.
Yeah, with everything they had.
Yes.
Civilian houses being taken out.
Well, now, the situation, as you might hear, is that the radio station has now been taken over. We have 3 Argentine members.
We have everything recorded in 2 tapes.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Well, just a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
You wait a minute, please.
Go ahead.
We've been taken over the radio station, as expected, by the Argentine invasion force.
And up in this garden, it's absolutely surreal. We're down low, in the best cover we could get in his back garden, lying in under the hedges and in amongst the flower beds and things. And there's this guy in his conservatory, glass conservatory, with his watering can, watering his plants. And there's shot and shell flying in both directions. And he's watering his plants without a care in the world.
To wait some minutes, in some minutes the chief is going to communicate them what we want for the population.
Well, just a minute.
Señor, un minuto!
If you take the gun out of my back, I'm going to transmit that news. If you take the gun away. But I'm not speaking with a gun in my back. Well, there's an argument going on now between the three Argentines. They've disappeared. They've left me alone in this room.
Yeah, I was in that garden when we were told to lay our weapons down, to knock it on the head.
Yeah.
I passed the word round to the lads, destroy your weapons, smash them up, strip them down, scatter the components.
Yeah.
Because I'd passed my lighter to the boss to burn his maps and codes and things, I didn't have a light for a cigarette, and in those days I smoked. So I got the guy in the conservatory to give me a box of matches so I could spark up a fag.
Yeah.
How I got that fag lit, I don't know. The hands were shaking so much. During the fight, the firefight, I was giggling. In fact, I think I was giggling like a drain at one stage. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty terrifying.
Well, yes. Yeah.
There's one thing I want to clarify. Some people have been phoning me and they're not happy with the way I've been presenting this information to you over the last 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours or 10 hours, whatever it is. Well, I'm very sorry for those people that I haven't given you the information as you wanted. I don't know what you wanted me to say, but I've tried to present to you an unbiased and fair report on what's happening. And when I say that I think it's good news that a truce has been agreed, I mean it's good news because I hope that none of our boys are going to get shot. That's what I mean.
While we were doing what we were doing,
Yeah.
what was happening in your house?
I woke up. It was still dark, and I could hear all these gunshots and explosions and stuff going off, and I presume I heard Moody Brook going off in the background with the Argentine attack there. And then I heard closer guns as well. I didn't understand what was happening. My bedroom was in a loft conversion, and it was a wooden house. I didn't really know what was going on. And so Dad said, come on, it's time to get up. And I sort of laid in bed trying to wake up, thinking, what's going on? So I got up and I looked out my window to see what had interested him. And those Marines and the shooting had gone, but I could see some soldiers all dressed in black. Argentines, they were, I know now, with black knitted hats on and all their clothes were black, and they were just creeping along the fence. And then I looked a bit further along and I could see the football pitch to the side of Government House, and there was a bit of a battle going on there with some shooting and guys getting shot and stuff going on there. So then I got dressed. It wasn't going to be a pyjama day. Went downstairs into the kitchen, and it was cold, really, really cold, and the lights were off because Dad had switched off the fire the night before. So it was very cold, and Mum and Dad were listening to the radio, and I really wanted to talk to them. But we were just listening to the radio and hearing all this stuff about Argentine forces coming into Stanley, and Tom Davis had phoned into the radio station, and he said that I can see the stars through my roof because they'd hit his house with something big and his water tank had gone. And then people all over Stanley were just phoning in. It was just mad. I don't want to stop.
As scary for you as it was for us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But we survived.
Hello? Yes, sir? His Excellency the Governor is on the line now, and he's going to speak to you before we have to play the Argentine tapes. Yes, sir, go ahead, please.
Hello. Admiral came along to me and I told him that he'd landed unlawfully on British sovereign territory and I ordered him to leave forthwith. He refused, claiming that he was taking back territory that belonged to Argentina and it was Britain that was unlawfully in possession. I said that it was reprehensible that Argentina should have seized the islands by force after Britain and Argentina had agreed in the UN to settle the dispute by peaceful means. He said he was a soldier merely obeying instructions. That's all I got to say. I'm sorry it's happened this way. It's probably the last message I'll be able to give you. But I wish you all the best of luck. And rest assured that the British will be back.
Sir, hello? I'm sorry, I've lost his Governor.
So we got a phone call sometime during the morning that Mum needed to go to the hospital and we didn't live that far away. I guess it was after the shooting had stopped.
And I'd like all the visiting people, the invasion group, to know that Mrs. Bennett will be leaving her house shortly carrying a white flag, and she will be proceeding to the hospital, and she asks for clearance to go to the hospital and do her duty. Thank you.
She put on her uniform, any badges, the whole nurse's stuff, belt, badge, big buckle, all that. Dad got a broomstick and tied a white pillowcase to it. That was her white flag. And then she walked out of the house and across the playing field carrying this white flag. But just to see her going off where there had just been a battle going on just shortly before, and there she was going off walking down that same set of steps across the playing field. And then down the road, and we just watched her go. And we didn't know if... Well, that's true, we didn't know if we'd see her again. And then we just had to wait and watch our town being taken over by the Argentines.
At this moment, I've been instructed to play for you a tape. I don't know what it is, so I'm going to play it for you now. Islas Malvinas Broadcasting Station for the whole of the Argentine Republic. We shall listen now the Argentine National Anthem.
There was some locals in hospital as well who still needed to be looked after. And then at the end of it all, there was a pregnant local lady whose baby was due, and so this baby was being born, and somewhere Mum or one of the other nurses found this British flag, and as the baby was coming out, they just the humour, the stress of it all, but they held this British flag up so the baby was born under a British flag. And that was the great joy at the end of all this death and madness. Yeah, so 2 crazy, crazy days.
And contrary to popular belief, back in the UK, it wasn't just a token 6 shots fired in the air and then surrender.
No, absolutely not. Thousands of shots were being fired, and big stuff too, and the hospital staff were kept busy for 2 days solid. They were just there, soldiers, armed soldiers, bringing in casualty after casualty, and some died, some didn't, and they just worked solidly for 2 days. Everything they knew, all their resources, they just used.
over the last year of looking at all the stories from 200 to 300 people who were involved from all three sides, the Argentine casualty count that was put out there of but 1 man killed and 3 men wounded simply crumbles. It's not true. It can't possibly be true. There's too many people who even found dead men in their gardens, and once you start adding those up, I could plot them on the map. The Argentine casualty count was easily 100, and I considered it would probably be closer to 110. It could even be more. And I appreciate it's something that people are going to say, well, it can't be true, because we'd have known. If anyone had bothered to ask the Falkland Islanders, they could have told them everything. They could have told them about the bodies that were floating in the harbour from the landing craft that was sunk. That is still denied to this day, and we found it. We know it's sat on a beach now, and it was pulled up with a big rocket hole in the side of it. They saw the bodies in their gardens. They saw one of the streets, St Mary's Walk, was described as a slaughter yard. It was just blood and nasty things everywhere. This cannot be 1 man killed, 3 men wounded. You don't have a packed hospital with nurses working around the clock for 48 hours and a field hospital and endless ferries, the Royal Marines described them, of emergency evac helicopters picking people up all over town for 1 man killed and 3 men wounded. That doesn't happen.
What amazes me is that you guys had been there for a couple of days. You didn't even know the lie of the land. You hadn't...
Not a clue. I hadn't even seen a map.
No, they'd planned it and they thought about it. They dreamed about this invasion. You didn't know exactly where they were going to land. You didn't know what equipment they were coming with.
Yeah, they'd never met Marines with hangovers, had they?
Oh, of course, you had hangovers as well.
Yeah, from 2 nights before.
Okay, that's some hangover.
It was.
No Weetabix for breakfast?
No breakfast.
Okay, they got on the bad side of you.
Comando del Teatro de Operaciones Malvinas. Comunicado número 1. El comandante del Teatro de Operaciones Malvinas, en el ejercicio de las facultades ordenadas por el gobierno argentino.
The next time we actually had something to eat was in the grounds of Government House, after we'd been rounded up by the Argentine Special Forces.
Make it quite clear that it is no longer the station that you knew, run on the same lines as previous. You understand, they are answering my phone calls and they are telling me what I must do. So I have to obey these instructions. Whether the Falklands broadcasting station will ever return to the situation it once knew, I don't know, but I sincerely hope it does, because it's a job that I loved and enjoyed doing for you, and I hope that I can continue to do this job somehow, because for me the Falkland Islands is the greatest thing on earth. Okay? Sorry if it seems rather sentimental, but that's the way I feel at the moment.
Well, at the time we didn't know whether we were being flown out or being taken out to get executed.
Yeah, of course. What awful thought. You just didn't know.
Got up to the airport. They put us onto a Hercules, flew us into Commodore Rivadavia. They then took us off of that the Herc and put us onto a Boeing 707. And the next thing we know is we're in Montevideo.
Did you know you were going to Montevideo? Because that's in Uruguay.
No, didn't know a thing.
Okay.
Didn't know where we were going. Mm-hmm. But I slept through the landing, and then this young Argentine scrote from the back of the aircraft, he came down and smashed me in the face with a rifle butt to wake me up, to get me off the plane. So we ended up in a posh, I think it was a hotel with a casino attached to it in Montevideo. Mm-hmm. We got in there about 4 o'clock in the morning. They laid on a meal for us, and it was the best fillet steak and chips I think I've ever eaten. And we were told whatever we wanted to just sign for. So everybody's ordering beers and just signing for it. You started off signing the first couple of chits with your own name, and then you start clicking on and think, oh, this is a good thing.
Yeah.
So you start signing M. Thatcher or M. Mouse, Mr. DMS Boot. Just made up names, just signing for beer. I'd hate to see what the bar bill was like. It must have run into thousands.
Because we, of course, saw Marines going away. First, we saw Rex Hunt in his London taxi, in all his finery. He was wearing his full governor's uniform with his everything, and he drove along the road in front of our house, on the other side of the playing field, St Mary's Walk. He drove along there, stopped at the radio station and made one final broadcast, and then off he went to the airport. And around about that time, an Argentine vehicle full of Marines went down the road as well. They weren't in one of those tracked ones, they were in these ones that they're basically boats with wheels on them.
Larks.
Exactly. Those. And we knew they were the Marines, and they were just standing to attention as standing strong going past. But it was really quite sad to see them go. We just watched them go, and my dad just said, "There go our boys." And so that was it. We were all alone. And we just knew that Britain wouldn't leave us on our own. And we had no shadow of a doubt that the British would come back for us, and they would kick out the Argentines, and they would be successful. And so we hung on to that hope all the time. And the other place that we found comfort was with our friends and our neighbours. And we were already a very close community, but we got even closer, and people were always in and out of each other's homes, standing, congregating in shops, in churches, anywhere that we could just stand and talk. There was this rule that you weren't supposed to gather in groups of more than 5, but we seem to have overlooked that one quite successfully. So strength and comfort from our family and from neighbours and relatives, and just finding out who was still alive and who was still going on.
Okay, Malvinas Operation Theatre Command, communique number 3, instructions for the population. Please listen carefully, because this is important, this is not a joke. As a consequence of all the necessary actions taken, and in order to ensure the safety of the population, all people are to remain at their homes until further notice. Please take note of that. All people should remain in their homes until further notice. New instructions will be issued. The population must bear in mind that, in order to ensure the fulfillment of these instructions, military troops shall arrest all people found outside their homes.
So there were all these edicts and all this stuff they tried to make us do, drive on the right side of the road, and, as I said, not congregate in big groups, and I don't know, rules, new place names, all that kind of stuff. They tried to teach us the Argentine national anthem, but and then we just tuned in our radios to listen to what the world was saying, to see if we could hear BBC World Service, to find out what was going on. And yeah, no television, of course, so we couldn't see that. It was all about radio.
07 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. BBC World Service, the news, read by Lawrence Reeve Jones.
And when that Vulcan first came, Operation Black Buck, and it bombed the airfield, and people had tears in their eyes, people were dancing in their gardens, they were saying, "Come on, Maggie's boys, give them..." And they knew, at that moment, they knew that Britain was coming. And was their confidence misplaced? Never. It was... I'll be honest, they shouldn't have had that confidence in us, considering how bad the British government had been towards them. And it's fantastic of these wonderful people that they never lost hope.
The Argentine soldier that drove the truck that took us up to back to Moody Brook to pick up personal effects, when I told him we'll be coming back, and instead of 60 of us there'd be 6,000, he was terrified, absolutely terrified.
Radio Falkland making a patriotic return to the airwaves after the trauma of the last 10 weeks. And one of the first messages read out by radio manager Patrick Watts from his two-room studio up the road from the Upland Goose Hotel in Stanley was one from the people of Stanley to 3 particular people in London.
The following message was sent today to His Excellency R.M. Hunt Esquire, CMG, care of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, London. We extend our good wishes to you, Mrs. Hunt, Diana and Tony, and should be grateful if you would convey to Her Majesty the Queen, Mrs. Thatcher, and the Government of the United Kingdom our sincere appreciation to Her Majesty's fighting forces and the Merchant Navy for liberating the people of the Falkland Islands, and we look forward to the development of the islands in peace and prosperity. God save the Queen. That was signed Harold Rowlands and the people of the Falklands.
After the conflict, in fact it was several years after I left the Marines, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And this came about through, was in the house, got not a clue what happened prior. I just came out of a very, very dark place, and I had my wife pinned to the kitchen floor by her throat.
Mm.
And all I could smell was tussock grass. In that brief instant, she was the enemy.
Yeah.
And I was going to kill her.
Yeah.
Having been diagnosed with PTSD, they reckon it's cumulative, mostly from the Falklands, but Northern Ireland and the first Gulf War as well. I do get very, very emotional about it and tearful. But the psychologist, the last psychologist I saw, said that the way emotions are suppressed, getting tearful, that is, and sadness, that is one of the first emotions that gets buried, and it gets buried the deepest. But it's now starting to come out, so hopefully I am improving.
Yeah.
But been on medication for donkey's years. There's just too many demons inside. One that I've not had it for a little while now. Is at night I wake up very, very scared, and I've just got this mental image of a foreign soldier coming over the top of a lampshade on the bedroom ceiling with a rifle, attempting to stick his bayonet in me. It's odd. The mind is a powerful thing, and when it goes wrong, it's very, very upsetting. The scariest thing about post-traumatic stress disorder is you think you're normal, and everybody around you is a loony. But it's not. It's the other way around. Everybody else is normal. You're the loony. You're the one with the problem, not them.
But it's not about what's wrong with you. It's about what happened to you, and this is the big difference.
It is that.
Yeah.
Probably different for you than it's to be, but I've got no animosity at all now towards the Argentine soldiers.
Okay. Yeah.
For years and years and years, well, my mum, since April 2nd, my mum's never ever bought Up until the time she died, she never ever bought another can of Argentine corned beef.
Okay.
She actually meticulously read every single label to make sure it come from Brazil.
Bless her.
My mum hated the Argentinians for what they did, scaring her. I don't feel anything. It was just me doing my job, and the rest of the guys doing their jobs as well. I have no emotions at all towards the casualties that we created. They were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They shouldn't have been there. They should not have been there. If they'd stayed at home, it wouldn't have happened.
Well, this is true. Yeah. I kind of don't really understand what I think about wars. Because I was there living in my house, and these guys came invading. Of course I didn't want them to invade, that's obvious. But at the same time I know that I'm a mum of a 19-year-old son, and some of that, you were pretty much that age, and some of these lads are, some of those Argentines were the same age. And so yeah, I suppose it's just that they're not just what you go out to do your job every day. They're also real people. But they're real people who happen to be invading the home of another real person who just wanted to finish reading James and the Giant Peach.
Operation Corporate, which was the task force, if you will, has in effect become the Falklands War. People don't remember April 2nd. People remember a little bit about April 3rd, the defence of South Georgia, but most people don't remember this story. We don't much like the story of a defeat, and I suppose we don't look at it, and we just thought, well, it's embarrassing. There's not much to look at here. There's a vast amount to look at here. It all starts on day one, and I think the main reason as to why this has stayed silent for 35 years, why these Royal Marines haven't received their medals. There were 5 military medals recommended. There were 12 mentions in dispatches. We would have to admit that there was more to it than we were going to put out there, that we knew the Argentines were coming, that we knew what our Royal Marines had actually done that day, and because they didn't die, their story had to. I think if you put a medal on that, you kind of rubber stamp it.
I think that anybody who was in Stanley on that day knows that you guys put up an enormous fight to fight for our freedom. You had the choice to just not do anything. Yeah, right. You had the choice to grab the governor and run away into the hills. But that's not your style. And you chose to fight like crazy with the option of putting your lives before these Argentines, thousands of them coming your way. But you put all your training into practice and fought for our freedom, and that is really, really amazingly humbling.
It's just what we do.
Yeah. And so to have those Marines standing there on behalf of the Queen fighting for our freedom is pretty awesome thing. And to have this conversation with you about it is so very special.
Thank you.
And yeah, to know that we weren't forgotten about, and that Argentina wasn't just going to be allowed to walk into our home and take over because they chose to.
Approximately 60 of us and 2,800 of them. Held them for nearly 6 hours. But even if it was just being British pig-headedness or just putting one over on the opposition, it was definitely worth doing. I'm glad we did it. We'd like to do it again. A scary time. But glad we did.
Yeah.
My Falkland Islands War story was produced for BBC Radio Cumbria by Andrew Carter. And in it you heard the voices of Rachel Simons, Mark Gibbs and Ricky Phillips, whose new book, The First Casualty, promises to rewrite British and Argentine military history. You're listening to BBC Radio Cumbria.
I'm Graham McIntosh at the BBC Travel Centre. A warning is in place on the M6 in both directions between